The Articulate Coven is the original, unofficial podcast and fan community for Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire and Anne Rice's Immortal universe from AMC and AMC+. Welcome to the Articulate Coven. We are your hosts,
Ashley Wright-Eiler.
I'm Joel Sharpton, and this is the Articulate Coven. Ashley, oh my goodness, we've got a lot to talk about this episode, but I actually have now we're in the thick of things. I know now we're in the thick of things because I have some feedback. I have some information that has come to light that needs to come to air early in the episode. So the first thing is a small thing. I have dove into the world of YouTube feedback on this wonderful series that we love. Most of it, they're not as profusely excited about it as I am, so they end up making me mad. But one in particular, I did want to link for our audience, and it's something that I hadn't thought about because I've read her work for so long, it almost doesn't stick out to me. But in episode 2. The word preternatural was used to describe Lestat's charisma. And this YouTuber in particular, who I'm going to link in the comments here, and Ashley, I'll send you the link shortly as well.
Okay.
She, in her review of that episode, calls it out, says this must be sort of a reference to on the part of the writers to the joke in the fandom. There's apparently even charts online about how many times in each book Anne uses the word preternatural.
You can make a drinking game out of it.
Exactly. No, absolutely. Once you think about it, oh man, she does every time she's describing their powers, she calls it preternatural, doesn't she?
Oh, 100%. I keyed in on that immediately.
So what's funny though is the YouTuber explains it, and I don't know why I had never questioned the word, honestly. Like, it's a word in context, it's very clear what it means. And yet I don't think I'd ever looked up the dictionary definition of it. I don't think I'd ever thought about why she uses that word instead of some other word. And this YouTuber explains it. I'm going to give you the TLDR, but I'm also going to link it with the timestamp because I strongly suggest you going and listening to the full thing. But basically, preternatural is just the secular version of supernatural. Supernatural implies that the power, whatever you're describing that is above and beyond the natural or expected world, the natural levels of power or strength or whatever, that supernaturalness comes from a deity, either good or evil. The supernatural doesn't say, but it comes from outside. Whereas Anne's vampires are not of God or the devil. They are a very natural occurrence, that I don't want to spoil for folks who are watching this and reading this all at the first time. That does come up eventually in the books, and I think we're going to get that explanation on the TV series as well, which will be fun to see it played out on screen for the first time, really. But anyway, that's the reason she uses the word. It's a secular version of supernatural. And if you think about it, if she had used the word supernatural all those times, I don't think we would have questioned it. I don't think it would be a running joke because, I mean, how else are you going to describe the way that they leap into the air, or the way that they cross the floor almost instantaneously, or the way that they, their eyes glisten, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, very interesting. She's got a great explainer. I am going to continue to watch her reviews of this thing, even though she picks a few more nits than I would care to. But overall, she does have great discussion. Particularly, she's got a very keen eye for the differences between the book and the TV series. So, link in the show notes in case you've ever wondered about that word in particular. Go check that out. That's the first thing. The second thing, a follow-up, Ashley, you and I discussed in a previous episode, and I think this was when we were discussing the behind-the-scenes special.
Okay.
We both expressed an interest, a desire to have, why hasn't Christopher Rice said anything about the series? Boy, it makes me trepidatious about everything and makes me feel a little soured here as we're celebrating this thing finally coming. Well, apparently he may have, at least in coded message. First and foremost, if anyone tweets at him or posts on Facebook about it and tags him in it, he has a very standard response.
Right,
no
absolutely.
comment on the series. Please, I refer you to AMC TV.
Absolutely.
I haven't listened to all of his podcast episodes. I haven't gone back and trailed this down, but I saw a thread about this very question on Twitter. And through a little bit of sleuthing, I backed up a couple of things that were said. The general sense is this, and my own recollection backed this up too, correct me if I'm wrong. Anne was very loud, and Christopher very loud about the development of the series before it was at Hulu, then once it arrived at Hulu, and all through that period of time when it was in production at Hulu. They both talked about it quite a lot. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that seems on point. That they were kind of, it felt like they were much more involved.
And then they announced the AMC acquisition, and I think they even said more to come soon. Let us go behind closed doors and dot our I's and cross our T's kind of thing.
Right.
But then after that, they never said anything again. The sense that I got from people working in the industry is that everybody's tried to be very nice and say the right things because nobody wants to offend or burn any bridges that are unnecessary. But it seems like Anne and Christopher both were very, very insistent on Christopher being a big part of the writing room, maybe even the central or primary part, and that the general feeling at AMC was that was not a good plan. And that eventually came to a head, and that involved the two Rices effectively walking away from the project in person, although their names are still on it as executive producers. And I'm sure there's a huge chunk of change that goes regularly to the Rice estate, which
one would hope so.
Christopher's, right?
Yes.
And I'm imagining, I get the sense, and the sense that I got online is perhaps that those payments are tied to a closed mouth, either directly legally required,
right,
or just, hey, I know the check's still cash, and I may be heard about it, but I'll keep my mouth closed as long as this thing is a success. So either way, I said this before without knowing. Now I feel like I've got a better glimpse of what's gone on there, and I still feel as I felt then. Chris gets to feel any way that he wants to about this series, and that is absolutely fair. I also feel in my heart, and I think back to, Anne was famously super upset about the casting of Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
And disavowed the production entirely, told her fans that everyone in Hollywood would sell their own mothers, for a penny, whatever. They were all heartless. It was terrible. It was going to be ruined. And even though she had been involved in the production up to that point, she had been pretty heavily involved. I think, her name's on the screenplay still, if you watch the movie.
Yeah,
so anyway,
yeah.
And then what happened? That production got finished, or almost finished. They sent her a screener. She ate all of her words, took out an 8-page ad in the newspaper and praised the film and apologized to everyone involved, especially Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, and told her fans, please, 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 listen to me now. Forget what I said before. This is a loving portrayal of my characters, et cetera, et cetera. I think the same thing would be going on now. I think when she saw the care that was provided to these characters, the clear love that these actors have, especially, and that the creators have, and that the meticulous, production levels that are being brought to this, I can't help but think that she would be pleased by it. And so Chris gets to feel how he wants to feel. Hell, I'd be mad if I lost my shot maybe at a big job in Hollywood. If this was a success and he was one of the writers, he would have a long career in Hollywood probably ahead
Absolutely. Of him. But here's the thing too about I know enough about the television industry to know that a writer's room is a very finicky place. You know what I mean? And it really does require the right assortment of people. And you really have to trust the showrunners to make those decisions. And I hope that, I 100% agree. Chris gets to feel how he wants to feel. Christopher can feel how he wants to feel. I hope that he ends up being pleased by this. And I hope that, this, regardless of this, his career is on the trajectory he wants. He just released a new book recently. I think that getting to tell his own stories, maybe long-term, might be more important to him.
I hope so as well. And again, I think I don't know the dollar figures, but you can't help but imagine there's going to be some recurring revenue from this
money
Rice universe. Interestingly enough, I'm not really an erotica reader generally, but I did download his last audiobook, went on super sale on Audible for it was like $5 or something, and I was like, I like Chris, let me go download his book and listen to it. And I don't know who the narrator is. I haven't dove into it yet, but I'm hopeful it'll at least have some steamy scenes in it. God knows.
Yeah.
I'm rereading the Witching Hour right now. I'm almost done. I'm like 4 hours remaining. and his mother. Oh goodness, that woman wrote some smutty stuff, man.
Oh, for real. And I love it, love it, love it. It's so great. I want to, what did he had a really funny tweet about that. Um, a few years ago that she responded to that was just like, how many of your boyfriends of, I don't remember the whole ins and outs of it, but it was so freaking funny. And she responded to it. It was such a brilliant exchange between the two of them. But like, yeah, she wrote some real filth and it's awesome. I love it.
Well, it is fantastic. Some of it is not my particular cup of tea. As I told someone the other day, though, about this series, the TV series, I don't like to yuck people's yum, and clearly Anne's expression was vast. Let's put it that way. I'm imagining
Yes.
Christopher is capable of that same thing too. All right, enough of that preamble. Ashley, let's get into the episode because this was a good one. Non-spoiler first. What did you think?
Again, I felt like I had a great time. Love it, love it. I do feel like this was kind of one of those, like this is an episode to get us. It's a transition episode. It's to get us to the next section of the story. So it set up a lot of a conflict that we need to see. It kind of pushed those things along. We kind of a lot of things shook out exactly the way that I thought they were going to, as far as what happens with the club and Storyville and all of that. That was kind of how I thought that they were going to head, with the time change and everything. And yeah, I had a good time. It wasn't as like thrilling and exciting as the last couple of episodes were, but yeah, it was still really rich and it really moved the story along. We got some really great funny moments. We got some really great poignant moments. We got some really great sexy moments. So yeah, 2 thumbs up over here. How about you?
I'm with you almost 100%. Absolutely. So um, there was speculation based on one of the season trailers. There's like one shot in one of those season trailers where Louis appears to be injured very badly. And there was a tremendous amount of speculation I'd seen online amongst the fandom that this episode's plotline was going to go thusly. They were going to sort of explore an open relationship for one reason or another, and that Lestat was going to be jealous and beat the ever living hell out of Louis. And
Oh,
I thought it was possible that they were going to go there. I mean, I think this story is at least the beginning of their relationship is toxic. There's no doubt
well,
about that.
yeah.
They're both very broken people and they misuse one another. But I was worried that first of all, that plot line is not directly in the book. I mean, nothing like that really happens in the books. And the idea of Lestat being directly physically violent to Louis, abusive to Louis, using his physical power, literally to do violence against him, that bothered me. I mean, Lestat's done a lot of things. I mean, he's burnt down Louis's house a couple of times in the books, I
Oh
think, for
yeah,
instance.
yeah, 100%.
You know,
He's a total asshole. He's your crazy ex-boyfriend, My
but
God.
I don't think I don't
I
the
agree.
Lestat in
That
my head
seems
anyway. The Lestat in my head anyway would not do that, and so I was worried that's where this episode was going. This episode does not go there, and so if you
no.
have been like hesitant to watch this episode because you had heard that speculation as well, no worry about that particular resolution. So go and watch it. We both
Yeah,
enjoyed the episode. There's lots of
that
good
would be
stuff here.
weirdly out of character. I mean, he's more of an emotional abuser. That's more our guy's style, and he will torture shit, but I don't think he'd beat you up.
Yeah, no, he will absolutely burn something down, but
Yeah,
he'll
I
wait until
mean,
you're not there in it. Oh
yeah,
goodness. All
he's gonna
right.
Lisa Lopez your mansion, but other than that, it's gonna be fine.
So this episode was directed by Keith Powell. Keith also directs episode 4, the one coming next week. So there was some
Oh,
continuity there. And
that's
then
great. I like
Han-
that. That's good to
I
know.
do too. So Game of Thrones has done that. I know Breaking Bad has done that in the past. I think Better Call Saul did the same sort of thing. And I think particularly in this current version of long form storytelling narrative that we're getting with these sort of TV series, I think it makes sense. It's like they're making a mini movie. Why not, allow them to shoot it that way? I think it totally works. And this one was written by Hannah Moscovich. Hannah also will write episode 5 2 weeks away. So they've they've got some continuing. I mean, again, it's as you mentioned earlier, Ashley. It's a writer's room, so I think a lot of those writers are contributing to all of these, but it's about the amount of the script. I think that somebody's actual pen or keyboard is on. I think that there's a union matters that determines who gets the head credit. Anyway, let's dive into it. So again, like I said, the speculation of this episode had me really, really concerned, but that turned out like largely not to be true. I love this episode, honestly. The humor, there was lots of romance,
a lot of funny.
The drama, the continued micro hints, by the way, at the modern day circumstances of Louis, I think in this episode were great. There's like little bitty ones we'll talk about later. I love what this show is building, both in the present day story and in the past story. It just makes me super confident. Honestly, it makes me more confident in the forthcoming Mayfair adaptation as well. Like
Absolutely.
this team has me on board. I'm down for the changes that they feel like needed to be made.
Yeah, I don't love. I'll tell you the one thing I'm kind of about with the Mayfair thing is I don't like combining characters. That really annoys the piss out of me. I just hate it. It's so poorly done usually.
I'll agree with you. But there are, first and foremost, like in the Interview with the Vampire here, I think you wanted a person of color in that main cast, and I think the quote unquote Michael character, the love interest for Rowan, is the character to do it. I also think the things that make both Aaron and Michael integral to the overall story can fairly easily be combined into one character. There's no reason why this character couldn't come from the wrong side of New Orleans originally, right? There's no reason this character couldn't have here's some spoilers for that book, but there's no reason that character couldn't have the Mayfair background as well, distantly, et cetera, et cetera. But those two characters spend so much of the first book particularly just sitting down telling each other what they both know. Honestly, there's so much of like, well, this is Michael, and let me tell you, Aaron, what I know about everything. And then, well, this is Aaron, and let me explain to you, Michael, what I know about things. And there's like a whole lot of that.
I just feel like Aaron's and maybe it's because we see Aaron in the Vampire Chronicles as well. I just feel like he's a fully developed character. It's kind of hard for me to see him being kind of, I don't know. I'll be interested to see how they do it.
Yes,
I was my one skepticism.
That I was super skeptical about that too, and I was fine with like changing a character like they did with Louis, moving a timeline.
Yeah.
But by the way, they've done that clearly in the Mayfair series as well, because Cortland is not alive in the modern day storyline, and yet Cortland, Harry Hamlin's character, plays a big role there. So like they've compacted, I think, some of the generations or moved some things around. Anyway, my point is, this creative team continues to win me over, and so skeptical as I am of those sorts of things, I'm like, I bet they've got a good reason. I bet they're gonna take us to a good place.
Oh yeah, I think anytime, like I said a couple of episodes ago, anytime I have had like any moment of like, oh, I don't know, they've come back either within the next 15, 20 minutes to soothe me about it and explain why they did it, or in the next episode. So I definitely feel like we're in good hands. I obviously still trust our team completely. This episode was a lot of emotion and a lot of fun. And then a lot of passion and then disagreement. It's good times had by all.
I love the opening scene there on the bench, and they're Lestat is explaining the history of the square.
Just their physical relationship plays so brilliantly. Like, they're clearly, as actors, very comfortable with each other physically when they sit near one another, when they sit in proximity, and when they're they just look like they belong together. They look like a pair, and it's so wonderful to see that being portrayed so well and so cleanly.
I'm 1,000,000% on board with that. I'd like in agreement with that. And here's what's crazy too, when you think about it, these guys were cast on a Zoom call. Like their chemistry
during
tests
COVID.
We're over Zoom during COVID. Exactly.
It's crazy. They got so lucky that
absolutely
these
insane.
guys are this smoldering together.
Right? I mean, like you get, yes, they come off the screen together. Anyway, all right. So, but it seems there, I love what Louis is doing. It seems like he's basically ignoring Lestat. He literally mm-hms him at one point, and then he comes in with this cutting remark directly relevant to what Lestat's saying. Oh,
Yes.
have you read the part about how they cut off slaves' heads, runaway slaves' heads, and put them on the pikes as a warning? And Lestat's like, I haven't gotten there yet. Let me see.
Let me see if that's in this article, huh? Yeah, yeah. He's always. I like that. That's something that they're not willing to let us forget. That Louis won't let us forget the difference between he and Lestat, regardless of the fact, like we've discussed before, regardless of the fact that he is this elevated version of a human and that he is a vampire, he is still a black man, fucking dealing with asshole white people in New Orleans. You know.
Oh my God, there's so much of that in this episode, especially
Ugh.
that comes to a boil in a way that well, and it's interesting. You referenced it earlier, the passage of time and how that's going to change things, and it really calls out the fact that there was this strange period of time in Louisiana where, because of, and I wonder if the show's going to play more with this eventually. They've basically done it with one passing line so far. Louis' family got the power that they had basically because their family also bought into the white supremacist system. They were a different kind of colored than the
Right.
other guys who they maintained as slaves. I mean, his grandfather or whatever owned a plantation and owned slaves to run that plantation, and so that continued, like he reaches out here in this episode to try to do something for his people, quote unquote, and Lestat calls him out on those aren't
Yeah.
first of all, those aren't your people anymore. But
Were
also
they
like
ever?
but also he's misguided in his direction. It reminds me in some ways, this episode and Louis' sort of arc in it, of like Batman's like, I have to save Gotham, and any smart character, Harley Quinn does it in the animated series recently, like, hey, have you thought about low cost housing? Maybe,
Yeah,
have you thought about
right?
mental health programs in the city? You're a billionaire, Wayne. There's a lot of things that you could do actually to fix this city other than going out and punching poor people in the face.
Yeah,
and
Batmobiling
that's sort of
around
like
like a douche.
You're right, and that's sort of Louis like, oh, well, I'll fix this city. How's he going to do it? With violence? Like that's not how he could save New Orleans. He doesn't do anything for his people in this episode. Anyway, I love that we get there. One quick change I wanted to take your temperature on, though. Louis here in this first discussion sort of brings up the idea and pitches it to Lestat of killing only the evildoer. Now, he doesn't use that terminology because that's a very Lestat phrase, but he basically says like, what? Maybe we should be more selective in who we eat. And then he goes about showing that idea to Lestat and then doesn't follow through with it either. But what do you think about that? That's obviously a change from the book. Lestat in the book is already doing that at this point and even pitches that idea to Louis, I believe, in interview.
It's literally the first thing I have written down in my note, and I literally have it written trying to hunt the evildoer.
Nice.
I do think it shows us how our guy Louis just really struggles with the reality of being a vampire and the morality of it and all of that. And anytime, even when he's like they're going off hunting, they pick this guy, they're gonna eat him. Booyah. Lestat breaks his neck, and it's the most comically horrifying thing to see. And Louis still turns around and eats a cat. Louis, that's somebody's pet.
Lestat says, I wrote this down, I love it so much. Here's your criminal biscuit. See how it tastes.
Here's your criminal biscuit. Yes, that's so hilarious. So it's so funny. I do think that, like, obviously Lestat is like making fun of it, but I think that also could be one of those things we're seeing the story through Louis' eyes, and also that could be a really great way of like him messing with Louis and just kind of, giving him a hard time about his rat eating habits. Him just getting that freaking like cage of rats and just housing like a 6-pack of rats. Jesus Christ, there are better things to eat, my guy.
I cannot wait until one of the more modern, scientifically minded vampires begins to explain to him, hey, animals are all conscious too, right? Like,
I could think when he ate that cat that was probably somebody's cat, man. That was somebody's
right.
pet.
Like that's not even a stray, probably. Yeah.
Like, you dick. Just turn around and eat a porch cat.
So you mentioned it there too. I wonder, and there are a couple of things in this episode, especially, that make me think, um, we're going to see down the road whenever Lestat takes over narration, whether that be in a future season or a flashback episode, or I honestly still think we're going to get a full Lestat spinoff. This Sam Reed is too fucking good not to get his
Oh my
own show,
God.
and
He is
quickly.
yeah.
He comes off the screen so much. He's distracting to me. Like, I am a fairly straight man, Ashley, and that man is distracting. It's hard for
Yeah.
me sometime to listen to him because I just want to watch his lips move. Anyway, all right.
There was this
I've
one
expressed my
point.
fangirlness.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. There was this one point that in a scene with Louis, where he's so passion filled, and his eyes, and it might just be me being just caught up in it, but it literally looked like his eyes were brimming with like blood tears, and I was
Oh,
just like, "Holy shit, you're killing me right
we're
now, my man!"
we're skipping ahead slightly, but wait, I wrote that one down too. He says, God, what's the line? He says, I heard your hearts dancing. That was the
Oh,
moment.
yes, yes. And his freaking eyes were just like filled with blood tears. Oh,
Ooh,
I love that
it,
attention to detail. Like it just shows that they're telling the right story. They're just telling
well,
the
and
right story.
what's funny there too is that Sam had expressed during the production, he'd expressed doubt that the contacts were going to work because he's like, it's going to cut down on so much of our expression. And there is a perfect example of how, whether they're adding, like you say, whether that's blood tears and makeup or whether that's CGI even, or whatever they're doing, it you felt everything from him in that moment. So absolutely beautiful.
It even felt like his eyes changed color. Like they got
Yes.
more intense during that scene. It was like, I don't know if that's something that, like you said, they tweaked with CGI, or if they changed out his contacts throughout that scene, but it was like this eyes just turned on, and that's something that Anne spends so much time describing, our beautiful vampire's eyes, and it's so awesome to see that on the screen the right way.
So there's a moment later in the episode where Daniel asks Louis, "Was it raining or not?"
Oh,
Louis sees mud on Lestat's boots, and he's sort of recollecting. And you see the exact same scene played both with the rain and without the rain. I
I
think
love that.
whenever we get Lestat telling his story again, whether that's in a
Yes.
spinoff or whatever, I think we're going to see some of the scenes of this season specifically replayed ever so slightly differently. So, for instance, this moment where Louis is pitching the idea of eating the evildoer to Lestat, I think Lestat's going to be like, "No, bitch, that was my idea 150 years before you ever existed. I've been
Been
eating the
doing it.
evildoer."
Yeah, yeah. I think I hope that's how it is, because that immediately like struck me, and I was like, this is such great storytelling. This is so fun.
Yes, been doing it exactly. Yes, no, it's absolutely, this is hella fun, and I love. I think that's exactly what the creators are going towards here. I think they're telling us Louis is an unreliable narrator, even here in the
Yeah.
future when he's saying, "Oh, I understand Lestat better. I understand myself better. Circumstances have changed, et cetera, et cetera." I think clearly in this episode, he's still not 100% on things all the time, and
Well,
and
and Daniel
it's this
points out,
odyssey of recollection.
yes, I was just about to bring that up. Daniel points out, their dynamic is abusive, in some ways. This is a very abusive relationship, and especially in the story that he was told originally, in the story he was told 50 years ago, Lestat came across as a very abusive person, vampire partner, whatever. Um, and so he brings that up, and then we start comparing the two interviews to each other, which I thought was so interesting. And even the way Louis speaks in those first recordings are so flat and lifeless and dull compared to the way Louis is telling this version of the story.
I agree. It's interesting when they had played clips from the interviews before in the previous episodes. I hadn't really noticed a difference in Louis' voice. I just thought the little bit of difference I was hearing there was the clarity of the tape. But it's clear when they were playing it in this one that his voice has also changed in a bunch of different ways. His accent's slightly different. His
Right.
like his speech rhythms are different, et cetera, et cetera. It's clear to me, and there are again other parts of this episode that make it even more clear. This Louis is more at one with his vampireness. He's a much stronger vampire now than he was then, both mentally but also physically, clearly.
Absolutely. And I think we're even seeing I love that phrasing, the Odyssey of recollection, and how, I mean, I even see it within myself, when we remember things, and as time goes by, more and more we remember the things that were good about a situation rather than the things that were bad. And we tend to kind of, as time passes and as memory changes and as we learn and we grow and we forgive the people that maybe were involved in our past, that we remembered things in a different way. When we give a little bit more grace to the situation, we have a different version of that memory.
Absolutely. The other thing that occurs to me in this scene, especially because so they go back and forth about what you said then, what you said now, et cetera, and then he literally throws the tapes away, and Louis says, "Now who's being performative?" And so,
right.
Pointing out, I didn't think about it at first, but then clearly Daniel catches his meaning. He then goes and drags the files themselves to the trash can on his computer, and throws that away too. But I like that. So first of all, I didn't think about this at all, but I saw someone on Twitter that said it. Oh, this is the writers and the showrunners literally slapping fans in the face. They're throwing the novel away. So
we're throwing the first version of the interview away. It's not the novel that's being thrown away.
Yes, no, and listen, that's exactly what happens in the books too, right? Anne does this herself through the voice of Lestat in Interview with the Vampire, in The Vampire Lestat, where he goes, everything that you read in Interview with the Vampire is trash. That Louis was heartbroken. Yeah, he was heartbroken and mad at me and being petty, and I can't believe that he wrote those words.
That's my sad ex-girlfriend. Ignore her.
I mean, literally, he was jilted, and Armand had been in his ear for a decade. He was full of shit. So, I mean, I think that's what the showrunners are doing there. They're showing us that this show is taking place further along in the timeline when Lestat has said that, yes, but now here is Louis even saying, yeah, I was full of shit for most of that. That was performative. I've already told you that. We're all full of shit
when we're young. What's the thing
Boy,
is,
ain't
we're
that the
all
truth?
so full of shit when we're young. And as much as he hated being a fledgling vampire, you're still full of shit when you're young. We all are. Yeah. It's a universal experience. And I like that vampires are too.
I agree a million
We have
percent.
to all be stupid. We all have to be stupid.
So there is a moment, I think it happens right before that scene with Daniel where, or maybe right after, honestly, I can't remember. It's the first scene where Lestat has clearly gone and slept with Antoinette. And then afterwards, Louis meets him outside, Louis thinking that he's burnt Antoinette. Yes. I thought, she burns fast, huh? Well, I don't know. You look for yourself. It's a dentist. There was a dental convention in town. That was all very funny. But Lestat says something there when Louis asks him, am I not enough? And Lestat just laughs his head off. But then once he calms down and he realizes, okay, I'm hurting Louis here. Let me explain myself. He says, we'll be together 10,000 nights, 100,000. What we're doing is hard. And I love that because whether you're vampires or not, long-term monogamous or even poly relationships are very, very difficult. They're, continuous, positive, affirming acts. And that's what it takes to be in love with each other for 100,000 nights, and these two immortal chortle heads don't do it very well at first, at least,
They don't communicate well, our guys, and the thing is about the things that I understand about poly relationships, so that they have to be a certain set of rules that everybody's following, and everybody's on the same page with it. And it just seems like Lestat starts Louis out in a poly relationship without Louis's 100% consent right away.
Well, it's so interesting to me. Kelly and my wife and I were discussing it after we watched it today, and I was like, it's so funny because both of these guys, they can't speak to each other. They can't read each other's thoughts anymore, right? That got called out in the last episode. And both of these guys do these little things and think to themselves, it's nothing. It's performative. Lestat has a raging libido, and Louis has admitted that his has waned because of his dietary habits currently. And so
Right.
Lestat's freaking walking around horny here, and Antoinette's a beautiful little thing. Lestat is also canonically, especially now in this episode, they call it out. He is bi or pansexual. He
Absolutely.
likes a little variety, as he says here, and so like for him, this is just it's functionary. It's like going to the bathroom.
Right.
And he thinks nothing of it. And so surely Louis wouldn't either. Meanwhile, Louis is insanely jealous because he thinks, is Antoinette providing something that I can't? Is this what Lestat really wants? You know, I'm failing him as a vampire and a fledgling. I'm failing him now in the bedroom, et cetera, et cetera. Like he's all in his head. Meanwhile,
And this leads completely into the introduction of Jonah's character, and then
yes.
the reverse of this happening with Lestat. It's the difference in Lestat's mind between a physical thing and an emotional connection. And Louis is jealous of the physical thing, but doesn't really recognize that Lestat might be hurt by the emotional connection.
Well, first of all, Louis doesn't really feel the emotional connection other than here's what I think Lestat does sense that Louis is getting from Jonah specifically. With Jonah, Louis is not other, right? But even with
Right.
Lestat, even though they're both vampire, in this series, Lestat and Louis will always be other, at least especially in this time period, right? At this time in Louisiana, they cannot walk together as equals. They're looked at
Right.
as strange. Anyone that knows the fact that they're together thinks these hidden thoughts about, oh, they're sodomites and oh, they're this and oh, they're whatever, you know, blah, 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 blah. And yet, walking with Jonah, no one would think anything of it.
Right.
He's comforted by the sameness and the shared experience, but it's not for Louis an actual emotional romantic connection with Jonah. As he puts it, he gave me face and I dropped him off.
Well, I think in some way he's minimizing that too, because I do think there is something to be said for the emotional fulfillment that you get from comfort, from being comforted and
Mm.
finding comfort in another. And I think that part of that connection was that it reminds him and takes him back to when he was not this monster that he feels he is now.
Yes, no, there is absolutely, you know, it's interesting. Louis writes it off to Lestat as we had some early fumbles. But isn't
Yeah.
there something about that, like, quote unquote, first love or high school romance or whatever, especially when you're wounded? You know, you come back from college after a bad breakup, or you failed a class, or, you know, you didn't get the role you wanted because we were theater kids or whatever it is. You go
Right.
back home for a long weekend or a holiday or something. You bump into him at the store and it's like, well, I mean,
Well, I
I could feel
mean,
like the queen of homecoming for this weekend. You know, that would not be a bad thing, actually. I could be praised about all the ways that I've advanced in life and, you know, how I've
right.
gone beyond our fumbling experiences, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yes, you're right. I think Louis gets that. But even there, too, I think that's about power dynamics, right? He,
Oh,
in so
yeah.
many ways, is the weakened partner in the Lestat relationship.
Well, and we're told absolutely, and in this one he has the power because he even says that they had an age difference.
Mm.
So he met Jonah when Jonah was younger than him. So obviously there he has had the power in that relationship to start with.
There's two more things I want to call out with the Jonah storyline specifically. First of all, I love that he says he's interested. One of the reasons he signed up for the army was European sensibilities. They
European
care less about what
sensibilities.
you they care less about what you look like or who you look at. I think
Hmm.
this is one of the hints at what Louis will find so compelling about traveling to Europe. This is what he will see. He and Claudia can imagine a place where they can be more free. I think that's going to be the pull
Right.
for Europe primarily. In the book, it's very, very much about the origins. He believes that there are old vampires there. I think some of that will still come into play, but I think this idea, the European sensibilities, I think that's going to be the bigger draw for them to go to Europe whenever that comes up down the road. Second of all, boy, this show continues to surprise me with the sex.
Oh man.
We don't
Has
see
anyone
what
watched this on AMC? Has any
that's a,
like how
we
edited
need to
is
know
this
that.
on cable? I need to know. I need someone to report.
I'm gonna have to have a very uncomfortable conversation with my aunt. She's watching it on cable. I know. I don't know. We'll talk about that. So, what did you hear exactly? So we don't see what Jonah does to Louis in the bayou there, but we damn sure hear it happening. AMC, I am here for it, friend.
It sounded like the blowjob in the bushes from Joe Millionaire. I was like, what is happening? Am I hearing the Joe Millionaire blowjob in the bushes? I
I
am.
believe on TikTok. I believe on TikTok they call that Gak Gak 9000. I think is how they refer to that.
That's what the kids call it. Us oldies watch Joe Millionaire and recognize it immediately. It's awesome.
Oh my goodness.
They're really not fucking around. And I'm here for it. Like, I don't mind. Give me a little softcore action. I'm a red-blooded American woman.
Absolutely. Well, and I mean, again, like if you and anyone who calls this out is like, oh, what a change. The vampires don't fuck in the books.
Not.
As we said before, look, man.
They're so sensual in the books.
They're super sensual, but also like we just talked about Anne's writing, man. She was freaky deaky in all of her books. This shit is in there. It's text, not subtext. And I'm glad that they're doing it here in the series. It's not overdone. It's done as part of the storyline. Both the Jonah and the Antoinette thing, they were central to the plot line for this episode, and I think central to the ongoing development and building and breaking of Louis and Lestat's relationship, which is what this whole series is about.
Yep.
All right.
That's exactly it.
One other little thing there, Antoinette, by the way, played here by Maura Grace Athari. I wanted to call her out. I feel like I recognized her from something. I looked up her IMDb and I couldn't find it, so I don't know. In the novel, she's got a part still to play. Do you remember what I'm talking about? I wonder if she's going to here as well. She's still alive, by the way, at the end of this. Like Lestat dismisses her, but doesn't kill her.
Ooh.
So I don't know, but I wonder if Antoinette's not going to appear in a future episode. Let's just say that. The other thing in this area that we haven't discussed is when Daniel and Louis are having the conversation about the tapes. Louis says, "Now who's performing?" And then they throw away the thing on the trash can, on the computer, and then Louis uses the fire gift to light the trash can on fire.
Yes, he does.
Louis does not have the fire gift in the books. Not even not even in like the most recent books. So hold that thought, because some folks haven't read all the books. We're going to talk about that in the Easter egg section in a minute. I think maybe again that's a hint to some changes that are coming. Interesting stuff there. What else? Oh, I love the line, and again, it makes it canonical that Lestat is bisexual. What do you imagine confines us to a single note? Why not a chord? Why not a cluster? I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, they're real. It's just such great. Just like I love that these characters are being allowed to be who they are. It's just so nice that there's not like a muffler on them, like we're really allowing these characters to be as robust and as full of life, even though they are not as we've always imagined them to be.
So what did you think about the scene at the Dulac residence? Louis goes back to see Grace and the twins. He's missed the birthday party, sadly, because as Mama Dulac says, you're supposed to come around here during the daytime when people are awake.
Yes. Well, obviously there's a bit of a problem there that he cannot. We had to see this happen. It feels like the only thing for me is that it feels like it kind of came out of nowhere. I don't think we've seen quite enough for my taste of this tension and this relationship building. We just have the sense that he's not been there, and it's the lack of his involvement that has pushed her to deny him as her son. I don't know. It seems like too much too soon. I know it's earned in some ways, but in some ways it's not. I know that Mama has her instincts about how everything he's doing is wrong in her eyes and what she thinks, and so I feel like it just kind of escalated just a skosh too quickly, but I know we have to go there, and I know that that's what leads to everything that happens next, with our fire, and this is going to be our introduction and our lead in into Claudia. And so this is the right timing of it. I just wish there was like one or two more scenes with the family in the last episode, and maybe the beginning of this one.
Yeah, I feel like, and see, this is something I didn't think about on first viewing, but I watched it the second time today, and I felt the same way, that was, it was a little bit rushed. You understand why, and again, none of this even happens in the books. His family's all gone effectively
Right.
at the beginning. Paul dies early, and that's the end of his family's involvement. But the role, and we've discussed this too, in the books played by the Frenier family, here played by Grace and her husband, who is a Frenier, so they're sort of doing the same thing there, but tying it into Louis's mortal life directly, making his mom kind of the bad guy by calling out the evil directly and pissing off Louis there as he comes into the house. I guess the only way they could have done it, really, in retrospect, if you think about it, is if they had involved the family some way in the launch of the Azalea, right? Like if when he opened his big fancy business, if he had brought the family in and there had been a scene where Mama Dulac is turned away completely, like her nose is rubbed in the sin that her son is selling, maybe that's the moment where she's like, you really are of the devil. When she's sort of hinted to that already in the last episode.
Right.
There's the reference to she's mad because he's clearly gay and that's pissing her off. But like, yeah, I'm with you. I would have liked one more scene. Maybe that'll end up being in a deleted scene somewhere. They just had to cut it for time. But on streaming, you can let these things live. So
Right, absolutely.
Put it back in there.
We're here for your additional scenes that were cut. We want them. Give them to us.
So I really like
I know we have to, and I feel like all this is leading into the burning of the Azalea, which all mirrors the burning of the plantation, in the book. And so we're getting ourselves right back on track. For anybody that was concerned the story wasn't going to kind of follow the same path that it does.
The one thing that makes me question, though, how are they going to do this? So in the book, the plantation workers, the slaves largely, and the servants decide that Louis and Lestat are evil in some fashion. They don't have the word vampire, I don't think, but they know something's going on, and dead bodies are piling up, and that they're responsible for it, et cetera, et cetera. And they end up forcing them out, through a sequence of events, burn the plantation, and Louis and Lestat escape to the Frenier house at first, and then to New Orleans. Well, now that they've been sort of forced out of their societal position a little bit through the events of this episode, where are they going to escape to? I mean, they're going to stay in New Orleans for these next events. I'm certain, because we've seen, parts of the trailer with Claudia in it. So anyway, I'm interested in how their lives are going to continue there, since Louis has been.
Well, I wonder if we'll have
so public apart.
If we'll have if we'll have like a stage death, and then like that kind of rebirth thing where you just, and it's not like they can't live on Lestat's money. He's rich as hell, and so it'll be interesting to see how but you're totally right. I mean, where the hell were they supposed to go? New Orleans was where they went, but I can just kind of see them sort of turning more inward, and it being much more focused on it's kind of like the home life starting up. You got married, now you have a kid, you're about to have a kid, the kid's on the way, we all know, and so it's that kind of maybe turning inward into their own space, into their apartments, into their lives with each other and Claudia.
Yes, I absolutely agree that that's where the show is headed. I am captivated to see how they do it.
Some performances in this were so fantastic. I love his brothel manager. She is amazing and hilarious and brilliant. When they were like at that poker game, you let a woman count your money.
What was her name? Brickhouse, or was it just Bricks?
I'm not sure. I need to look that up. But she's brilliant. I love that performance. That actress was brilliant. I love how she stood up for her girls. My girls keep a tidy house.
No, I have pristine pussies walking my floor. I take offense at that. I thought that was hilarious. The other line that I thought was so good, she says, I've been called a cow, a cunny, and and the mouth who swallowed 1,000 dicks.
Yes,
And
yes.
you want me to take offense because you called me woman?
A woman. I love it. So she was brilliant. I loved her performance so much.
Well, and I do say that plays at least a little bit to one of my complaints, in the first episode was that we didn't get a lot of Lily. Lily didn't get a lot of agency or personality. Here's a good example. In a small dose, we get a little bit more personality, a little bit more agency from some of these surrounding characters, these workers.
Oh, it's fantastic that he's given all his girls a
Ownership.
percentage of ownership. So this is him working his way around these stupid ass laws they keep passing, or these ordinance they keep passing to try to put him out of business. And he ends up just like doing better things for his workers.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll be interesting again to see how he tries to connect with those folks that he sort of feels like he's responsible for now that they've shut down his businesses completely. There's a moment after the scene at the Dulacs when Louis returns. He's very upset after he's busted down the door on Grace and the kids. He goes back to the house, and Lestat is entertaining the entire army.
Oh my God,
front.
yes.
Sam, the whole scene is great, but when Sam is describing to Louis how these are all idiots and they would never stumble upon the coffins, Sam says all they want is a German on their bayonets, and the way he says it is like every dude bro ever in existence is so perfect. I love it.
It's
I love
so
it. I love
brilliant. I do too. He is just delicious. I mean, every episode he's just more and more endearing himself into my heart as being brilliant. I'm gonna have to watch this guy for the rest of his freaking career now because he's so great as Lestat.
Oh, I put like 4 of his old movies into my queue already to go and watch in the next couple of weeks as I have like Sam withdrawals because there's not a new episode out yet.
What does he say to Louis that he can, now that I know your type, basically you could fuck him and I could kill him?
Yeah, that's what he says. What? I thought you could fuck them and I could kill them. I could eat them. Yeah, I thought you would be excited now that I know your type. The moment though, because Louis hurts him there, he sort of lashes out at him. And so Lestat makes a show of shutting everyone down telepathically and sending them out. I thought that was so
awesome.
brilliant. So in the novels, Lestat makes it very, very clear, especially in the story of Interview and in these early years with Louis. Louis had been clearly repulsed by his unnaturalness, by the vampiric nature that he now had, all those strange supernatural things that he could do, preternatural things, that he could do.
Right.
Louis sort of hated himself for it. And so because of that, Lestat hides so many of the things that he can do. He downplays his own abilities to Louis so as to not make him feel worse about that. And here's an example.
Yeah, of something that Louis has no idea that he can do.
But here's an example where like Lestat does it out of pain, right? Like Louis has hurt him, and so Lestat hurts him back. Here's what you are. Here's what we can do. Fine. I'll send the humans away. You're not one of them, right? I feel like that is, and I think that plays perfectly to how these characters are, the nature of these characters, and the nature of this relationship. The only person who can hurt Lestat effectively is Louis. And he does it several times in this episode. I mean, the end of this episode, by the way, before he goes to meet Claudia, he breaks up with Lestat. There's no other way to read that. That's why you and I aren't going to work. That's why you'll always be alone.
Wow, that's such a cutting thing to say. That is so hateful.
Right?
That's like the most hurtful thing you could say to Lestat. That's why you'll always be alone. Oh.
I mean,
That's
Lestat has already told him specifically it's the one thing to dread as a vampire. The loneliness, the decades tricked by with no one around you. And listen, this is all very true to the books too. Book Lestat wandered the world begging for Marius to show himself,
Yes.
And I'm lonely. I know nothing about the world or my existence. I'm going to die, Marius. I'm just going to bury myself out here in the sand if you don't show up. I know you exist. Come and get me, please. And that's true. So the fact that, and we don't know exactly the path that he took. There's some extra years in there that we don't know for this version of Lestat. But anyway, the fact that he's bared himself in that way to Louis in the very recent past, and then Louis says that exact thing to him. I thought, boy, if Lestat grabs him and beats the hell out of him now, I could almost see why.
Maybe this is the scene that was coming.
Right? That's what I'm saying. I thought for a moment that's how this was going to end. Is like, oh, he asked for that ass whooping. Actually, is what happened. He told Lestat he was always going to be alone. I'm not trying to go on Twitter and excuse domestic abuse, but I'm just saying, listen. What did Chris Rock say? What did Chris Rock say? There's a reason to kick an old man down a flight of stairs. You just don't do it, right?
Oh my God. No, I mean, you definitely see that in this scene for sure. Before we get too far ahead of it, maybe we're not ahead of it and I'm just not remembering the right order, but I really am so happy that Louis finally killed that asshole.
Fenwick.
In such a glorious and disgusting, yes, in such a just horrifying, and he scared the shit out of that man before he killed him too, and I loved it. It was and Lestat is like, it's such a Lestat thing to do that he does, and but I was so happy for him, I love a little revenge. I can't help it. And that really was quite satisfying. Fulfilling. Mm-hmm, yeah.
No, absolutely satisfying. Here's the thing there though. There was a great line in there when they're in Fenwick's office. Fenwick says to Louis, "You haven't accepted your place in this world." And strangely, it occurred to me that is exactly what Lestat is telling Louis throughout this episode. Yeah. They're saying different things, and yet the message is actually exactly the same to Louis. Lestat believes, and it's strange too because Louis calls it out early in the episode on the bench. He says, they came from apes, we came from them, we should be better than them, speaking about humans. That's exactly Lestat's message. We are superior. We are above. Your concepts of morality are human still and misguided anyway. Based on what? Some God that doesn't exist, as far as I know, as far as you know, as far as anyone knows. How about you get on board with the fact that you're a killer, and why don't we use it, judiciously? That's what Lestat tries to do in the episode, and I feel like that's effectively, Fenwick saying take your places and you're beneath me because you're black.
Right. Absolutely.
But they're both saying you don't know your place in this world. And it occurs to me isn't that the whole journey of Louis? Is that he doesn't know his place in this world, sort of longs for it?
I mean, that's the whole journey of this particular book. I think that this is like one step Louis takes towards accepting what he is. This is probably one of the first times so far in the series that we've seen him really be violent with his kill, that he really plays with his food, so to speak, as Lestat is so wont to do. This is really the first time we see him be cruel to a victim.
Well, and I like that modern day Louis calls out why. He says in the narration, I had ignored my thirst. In all the hubbub that was going on, I had ignored my thirst and let it take me over. It's interesting, though, because afterwards, when he and Lestat are talking, Lestat praises him for his cruelty and his revenge. And it's not what I would have counseled, but good job. And Louis like, well, you made me do this because you weren't paying attention to me effectively. Like you didn't rein me in. Blames it on Lestat, which is that's so Book Louis. Like Book Louis effectively says everything I did wrong is because Lestat was stupid and very rude to me. That's Interview with the Vampire.
Yeah,
right.
And also manipulative.
Which, by the way, that's that's something you hear from in particular, you hear it now about President Biden. It's like, yes, he's a doddering old fool, and also he's the Antichrist who is manipulating world events. You can't have it both ways. Either he's got Alzheimer's or he's an evil genius. You can't be both. And yet Louis does that about Lestat all the time. He's like, he wasn't even literate, and yet also he was manipulating me secretively because he knows humanity better than I do. Blah blah blah. Anyway. I thought that was nice that in that moment, that's like Louis comes out there and just does it straight to Lestat's face. And Lestat calls him out on it. He's like, oh, you did this for your people? Did you? Did it help your people?
For you? How's that going out there?
Like, look out the window.
See? Yeah. And then it immediately leads into like this crazy ass, rioting in Storyville. Obviously, the people who are being harmed are freaking poor black folks, and Louis kind of runs into the fray, sort of haphazardly and disorderly and confusedly, trying to quote unquote help, and there's nothing to be done to help.
Nothing at all. It reminded me of two things. First and foremost, it reminded me a lot of the bombing of Black Wall Street scene from the Watchmen HBO series, which was so excellent. But also, it reminded me of something I think that is very much a debate in the books and sort of begins in this episode from Louis. Louis asks, "Have you ever thought that our kind was put on Earth for a reason?" And I think that's going to be sort of a search for Louis. I think it's definitely a search in the novels for the vampire population as a whole. What is the part that we have to play in human events?
The greater
do we
purpose.
have a part? Yeah. Right? And do we rule? Do we, and it's interesting. This is, if you're a nerd, this is the kind of thing you've read, for 30 years or 40 years now, whatever, in the X-Men novel comics and stuff. Like, this is that idea of like another race, another species sort of like overtaking humanity, and whether that's the right thing to do or not. And are they oppressed or are they oppressors, et cetera, et cetera? Like, all of those things are very rife for exploration. And I think this setting that we've had laid out and these characterizations that we've had begun to build and these creators have shown a willingness to dive into that stuff in a way that will matter and will be affecting in a way that good art should be affecting, as well as exciting and entertaining while you're doing it. Because God knows we don't read these vampire books because they aren't fun.
Oh, yeah, for real. I mean, my God, if this was just a loveless slog, I don't think any of us would be interested in it at all.
Well, I mean, we could all go read philosophy books if we want to, but we don't. We read our philosophy, or at least we don't again and again. We read our philosophy through the mouths of vampires.
Yeah, or I watch The Good Place and I do like the Reader's Digest condensed version.
Absolutely. All right. I think anything else is going to get into a little bit of Easter egg territory and maybe some hints to what's coming. So let's move into that territory. If you don't want to be spoiled on anything upcoming, if you haven't read this novel before, go ahead and bow out now if you'd like to. But we are going to talk a little bit about some speculation of where things might be going now. We hope you enjoyed the episode as well as we did. Check out the show notes for links to our Facebook group if you're not already part of it, and join the conversation there, or tweet us on Twitter as well. All right, let's get into the Easter eggs. First and foremost, we already mentioned the European sensibilities comment, but I think that is I think that's leaning in that direction. Here's the big one for me, and I mentioned this earlier, hints to the current situation. It was small, but there's a great moment. Daniel and Louis are speaking. Louis is pouring drinks for the two of them and then turns to walk away from the table and says over his shoulder, "You're lingering, Rashid."
You're lingering, yeah.
Rashid says, "Pardon me, Mr. Dulac," and disappears. Again, I say to you, Rashid does not work for Louis. I am convinced he will do Louis's bidding without question because he's been ordered to. But Rashid does not.
He doesn't act like that's his employer.
Yeah, that's not his employer.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very clear going after this that like we're definitely dealing with probably an Armand situation.
So that's still my guess, is that this is Armand's home. However, what I'm less sure of now than I was last episode. Last episode, I said in our speculation that at this point in time, I believe Lestat is in the ground. I think Lestat is sleeping. This is before his rock star phase. I'm not sure of that now. Here's why. Louis has the fire gift. Okay, maybe that's just because he's been cohabitating with Armand for a long time, it would seem, if this is Armand's house. Maybe they've been together since whatever, the 40s, the 1940s, when they go to Europe, whenever that happens. Armand has it in the books. His blood would absolutely be strong enough. He could have strengthened Louis over time. Or maybe, and this is my speculation, what if Lestat has already arisen and decided to wake Akasha? What if Lestat has even already woken Akasha, or at least drank from her again in the modern time, and has come to Louis and made his pitch for Louis to join in? Been like, come with me, my love. this is
Well,
the
and then
right thing to do.
that
In
kind of
that
lines up
case,
with
Louis
what
would have
the
the power too.
right, and that kind of lines up with what the showrunners sort of said in that behind the scenes thing, which is, you know, these books. This is an interview after these books, and he piles up the first five, and so that's something to think about too. Is this where this interview is falling in the timeline, and I'm sure we're going to get more information about it. The other thing is that could easily be Lestat's digs, in this new world we're living in this new kind of updated versions of these characters, but it just feels much more like,
Or Marius's, right? This could
yeah.
be Marius's. This could be
Would
Marius's
Marius have his own
compound.
paintings hanging up? Would
I
Marius
think he
hang his
probably
own
would. I
paintings?
think he did in times past. I think there's references. Maybe I'm missing this, but I think there's references in the books to him sort of being pissed off that the Talamasca have them in in the basements and stuff. They've got a bunch of works in the basements.
Oh yeah, that is true. I do remember that now that you say that.
And I mean, I think it's Lestat primarily that goes and steals a bunch of them out. But
Yeah, he does.
anyway, this could be like, for instance, if Akasha is already awake, but she hasn't really begun her reign of terror, so to speak, if maybe she's with Lestat, sort of understanding the modern world right now, if that's going on, then this could be Marius's house. Louis is there with Marius, and the two of them are literally trying to warn the world that a goddess is about to come and try to destroy it. Like, they don't know what her... Anyway, I'm saying, now I'm thinking this might be pre-Queen of the Damned. I think this might be pre-Queen of the Damned, and I'm so excited.
I'm just, however they line the timeline out, I feel like we're going to get full versions of all these stories. Like, we're going to get our wolf fight. We're going to get our crazy Akasha. Like, we're going to get everything that we're supposed to get. I really feel like it. As long as, the viewership holds out and the money's coming in the way it's supposed to, I feel like every bit of the story we're going to get, and it's going to be as good as we want it to be.
Absolutely. Like, oh, it is so clear to me. Like, go and look at the merchandise again. Go look at the night store.
Oh my God! There's a whole ass coffin, you guys.
There is a whole ass coffin. That's true. I'm like so close. I'm gonna get the hoodie. I think maybe for Christmas. I have already told my wife I need the coffin hoodie with Interview with the Vampire on the. It's like right under the neck on the back. It's beautiful.
The merch shop's only open from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. whatever time zone you're in.
Isn't that awesome? It's only during
it. It's hilarious. Hours. Oh, I love it.
But you look at that, you look at the Mayfair Witches series and like the money that they've clearly poured into that. You look at the way that they are already building connections between these things. The Talamasca is going to be a big deal for them. I think they've got spin-off ideas already for several of these properties. I think, yeah, this is in good hands, and I think they're going in interesting places. It is so fascinating for me to sort of like watch it unfold and and see the little hints of where they're going to go and be able to, with a little bit of foreknowledge from the books, go, oh, well, that sounds like this, or that sounds like this. It's like, the comment, I think it was in episode 2 about the brute from Madagascar sent us all diving. There's no mention of that, by the way. I have searched exhaustively in the last week. Madagascar is not a thing in the books.
Yeah. No one's commented to in the group either. So, I mean, I feel like we've pretty much done the research we can do. So what is that tease about?
Well, no, I think that's something new. That's what I'm saying. I think that's building up to the things that are going to unfold in the series that, as Roland Jones said in that behind the scenes special, I want to surprise the book readers too. I don't want this to just be a paint by numbers. Oh, and now they're doing this. Oh, and now they're doing that. And now they're doing this. I want there to be surprises as it unfolds. And so I'm here for that too. Honestly, I am just super excited and thankful for the way that this is going. And again, week after week, they continue to surprise me. I cannot wait for the arrival of Claudia next week.
Oh my God, our girl.
It's going to be a huge shift to the series. And again, it's one of those moments where, these characters haven't been, reimagined on screen for us in a whole generation now. And Claudia finally gets her appearance here. We'll be this excited again when Armand first appears, or Marius, Akasha, or all of these beautiful names. Mael, somebody brought up the other day, and I was like, God, I love Mael. I can't wait until we... Oh. But folks... We're going to get to all of them.
Yes. I'm so excited. Pandora is a favorite of mine. I'm really excited to finally see her actualized.
And well, and not just actualized, but you imagine she's one that we're going to get some full story on too. And like,
hell yes, we better.
Yeah, how can you not get excited about that? All right. Anything else particularly as far as like Easter eggs or little mentions that you noticed in this episode?
I really didn't. I was mostly, yeah. I think we hit all the ones that I saw.
Awesome. All right. Check the show notes for the link in particular to that YouTube discussion that I mentioned, and join us on Facebook if you're not already there. And otherwise, tell us what you thought of the episode. Every episode, by the way, gets its own spoiler discussion thread, so we can have these sorts of discussions there, and it's a safe space. Nobody is going to be mad about it, because if they're going to be spoiled, they won't read it. I promise. There's a warning at the top. What could you say?
Yeah.
Folks, I want to say on that note, by the way, thank you for helping us build such a fun little garden to play in and be geeked out and excited about this show and the coming accoutrement. Ashley, I mentioned earlier, I'm about 4 hours away from finishing The Witching Hour. I know you just dove into it, so that's probably
restarted.
Yeah, that's probably still a ways away. And it's cool because it looks like we're going to get... So this series will be done, I think, by the end, by the 1st of November, like the first week of November or the second week of November, this first season. And then we're going to have all the way until January 5th before the Mayfair Witch series drops. So we'll have a little bit of break in between. We'll get to The Witching Hour within that break as well.
Absolutely.
And we'll get to a discussion of that. But I love all of these worlds that she's built, and I am so excited that we're all getting to revisit them and that new people are discovering them. If you're new to the universe, welcome aboard. We're so glad to have you.
It's such a fun place to hang out. You're going to have a good time. You're in for such a wild-ass ride.
It's a savage garden. Drink up.
It is. Drink up, y'all.
All right. Until the next time we talk to you, go and watch episode 4 of season 1 of Interview with the Vampire from AMC and AMC Plus. Until the next time we talk to you, we've been the Articulate Coven. We're your hosts.
Ashley Wright-Eiler.
I'm Joel Sharpton, and we are the Articulate Coven. Thanks for listening to The Articulate Coven. You can join our community on Facebook by following the links in the show notes or searching for Articulate Coven on Facebook. You can subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or at articulatecoven.com. And share us with your Anne Rice-loving friends.